What exactly is burnout? Is it just stress? Is it weakness? Is the answer simply self care? Or is there something deeper happening beneath the surface? Burnout is talked about so often, yet understood so poorly. And that misunderstanding is one of the reasons people blame themselves when they start to struggle. Let's dive a little deeper into where this concept actually come from and why it matters. Because burnout was not created as a trend or a label to make people feel broken. It emerged because something real and repeated was happening to people who cared deeply about their work. In the 1970s, Christina Maslach, a social psychologist and an emeritus professor at the University of California, Berkeley, was interviewing healthcare workers, social workers, emergency staff, and other helping professionals. What stood out was not poor performance or lack of commitment, but the opposite. These were people who loved their work and took it seriously. Yet, they described feeling emotionally drained, detached, and ineffective in ways they could not explain. She kept hearing the same experience repeated across roles and settings. People who cared deeply felt empty, disconnected, and often ashamed of feeling that way. Because there was no clear explanation for what was happening, and although the word burnout does existed, it was informal, often dismissed as a slang, used to complain, or seen as a lack of resilience rather than something worth understanding. What Maslach recognized was that this was not a random and it was not a personal failure. It was a pattern that needed to be named properly. Michael Leiter, an organizational psychologist, later worked closely with Maslach for many years. And while Maslach focused on the lived human experience of burnout, Leiter focused on the workplace systems that quietly create the conditions for it. Together, they made an important shift in how burnout was understood. Burnout was not a weakness in the individual, it was a mismatch between the person and their work environment. This reframing changed the conversation from self blame to understanding what was out of balance. The most widely cited definition of burnout from Maslach and later is this: burnout is a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stresses on the job. And every part of this sentence is intentional. This definition makes it very clear that burnout is not about a single bad day or moment of stress. It is about what happens over time when certain pressure remain unresolved. A psychological syndrome does not mean a mood or a personality issue. It means a group of experiences that tend to show off together and reinforce each other over time. Burnout is not one feeling, it is a pattern. This is why people often say something feels wrong even when they cannot point to a single cause or event. Burnout does not happen overnight. It develops when stress is ongoing, recovery is limited, and demands continue to exceed capacity for long periods, slowly draining emotional and mental energy without obvious warning signs. This is why many people only realize what is happening once they are already deep in it, because the change is gradual rather than sudden. This part is often missed. Burnout is closely linked to relationships, emotional labor, responsibility, expectations, and pressure, not just workload. Even in roles without direct client contact, interpersonal stresses still exist through managers, teams, leadership demands, and organizational expectations, which is why reducing hours alone does not always resolve burnout. Burnout is not just about how much work there is, it is about the emotional and relational weight carried within that work. Maslach was clear that burnout is work related. It is not a general life condition and it is not the same as depression or anxiety, even though they can overlap. This distinction matters because it shifts the responsibility back towards the work environment and systems, rather than placing the full burden on the individual to cope better. To study burnout properly, Maslach and her team developed the Maslach Burnout Inventory, known as the MBI, which is still considered the gold standard tool used across healthcare, occupational health, hospitals, research, and workforce well-being programs. It does not measure moods or bad days, it measures burnout across three specific dimensions that tend to appear together. Emotional exhaustion is the core of burnout. And this is not just feeling tired or needing time off. It is feeling emotionally drained, having nothing left to give, and starting to dread interactions that once felt meaningful. In healthcare and other caring roles, this can show up as emotional numbness, compassion fatigue, or feeling overwhelmed by things that once meaningful. This is often misunderstood. Cynicism or depersonalization is not about being uncaring by nature. It is a protective response when emotional exhaustion continues for too long. People may start distancing emotionally, becoming detached or irritated, or relating to work in a more impersonal way, not because they do not care, but because caring has become too costly. Maslach described this as the nervous system trying to protect itself. This is where burnout starts to feel very personal. On paper, everything looks fine. Expectations are being met, feedback from clients or management might be even good, but inside, something feels off, and confidence slowly starts to slip. The work is still getting done, but it is no longer feels the same. And over time, that quiet doubt begins to take hold. Burnout can occur in any role that involves ongoing demand, responsibility, and emotional or cognitive load. Which is why similar patterns shows up across healthcare, education, business, leadership, caregiving, and many other professions. My background is in healthcare, but the patterns described here are human patterns, not job titles. Burnout is not simply being tired. It is not a lack of resilience. It is not a mental illness. It is not the same as depression. It is not something rest alone fixes. And it is not a character flaw. Burnout is what happens when work related stress becomes chronic and starts to change how someone feels, how they relate to their work, and how capable they believe they are. Many people blame themselves for burnout because they have never been given language for what is happening. And naming it does not mean staying stuck, it means understanding the problem clearly enough to stop carrying unnecessary shame. If any of this resonates, it is not because something is wrong with you, it is because something important is out of balance.